O Lord, may the words of my mouth and the meditations of all our hearts be always acceptable in thy sight, O God, our strength and our Redeemer. Try to get the cough out of the way. Many of you may recall the book I brought with me for my last sermon here. It was Timothy Snyder's On Freedom. I told you that I had read it 3 times, but I didn't always agree with everything in it for particular reasons, some of which I want to share with you today. One of the most important reasons comes in 3 parts, so it bears some numerical resemblance to the theme of the doctrine we remember today. But unlike the Trinity, what I bring is not a doctrine invented by a Roman emperor to punish heretics, but a guide to something we can actually do for more positive reasons. I'll add that it also challenges us, if we wish, to perform the appropriate Trinitarian gymnastics of trying to decide if it's one thing in 3 parts or 3 things in 1 part. The 3 constituent pieces I bring to you today are love, freedom, and peace. Many have tied them together in various ways, but they always seem to slip away to stand apart as unique and independent items. They are unique, but again, perhaps not in the ways you are expecting. And they are intimately interrelated and interdependent. Next, a couple of observations that should help you as I explain things. First, the order in which I list them is crucial. The order also represents an actual existential problem they all share. And that is that the requirements for love that I'll talk about are essential to progressing to the next step, freedom. And what we are required to do on the path toward freedom is essential to striving for peace. You can't start at freedom and go work backwards or forwards. You can't skip from love to peace. Trying to beat the system dooms your efforts to failure. And those kinds of failures are evident throughout history. Second, love comes in 2 forms. One binds people, generally 2 or a few, together reciprocally, either romantically or as a group, such as in a family. The other is what I call conceptual love, and is, perhaps, far more important in our lives. It shares things with reciprocal love, but does not need to be experienced reciprocally. The third thing that governs this Trinity is that both forms of love are part of our birthright. That's right, it's something that most of us are born capable of, though it's also something that can be unlearned or overridden in the environments we are exposed to as we grow up. I've spoken about this before, but today I want to also give you an extra twist that previously I omitted as superfluous until today. It all begins when we're young. Many of us can recall the times when we were quite young and we began to sense feelings we had about another person that weren't just friendship. Most of the time it's called youthful infatuation or puppy love, and dismissed just as a part of growing up. But we never really dismiss it entirely from our memories when it happens. It's the start of learning about love, and we begin learning about it early in life. Since love ultimately becomes deeply complex and personal, it's good to get acquainted with it early in less complicated ways. A well-designed birthright, I think. Well, in all of this, we experience 2 things that our psyches need to grapple with throughout the rest of our lives. First is the way that even in childhood, 2 people can sense the emotional power they have over one another. Simply put, their interactions affect their moods. making them happy or sad based on their emotions and driven by the power they share. The other, much more important thing we learn belongs to how all these feelings reveal how vulnerable we are to the ways that emotional power is used. Love, even in childhood, can be scary. The vulnerabilities can make us uneasy. Ending a relationship removes, to an extent, the sense of vulnerability, but as we grow up, hopefully we learn to deal with our own vulnerabilities and ultimately those belonging to the ones we choose to love. And here's where love is special. Sensing another person's vulnerabilities is one thing. Assuming the responsibility of protecting them takes love. There are tons of negative examples out there of relationships where one abusive person is in a relationship choosing not to protect the vulnerabilities of the other person, but rather to exploit them and to treat love as a power trip. Love is part of our birthrights, even if our subsequent upbringing has sought to toughen us up, so we never allow ourselves to become vulnerable, but always cruel and selfish to varying degrees. Unfortunately, in our society, unlearning love is easier than relearning it. Even more unfortunate it has always been that way. The conceptual side of love is not all that different. However, it is definitely not the hugs and smiles that some believe demonstrate love. And relying on religion for guidance will produce nothing but confusion sooner or later. That's been shown over and over. Conceptual love relies on how we understand our responsibility to the vulnerabilities of others, no matter who they are. We don't have to love them in a reciprocal sense. Hell, we don't even have to like them. Just as with those close to us, we need to provide whatever protects the vulnerable and nourishes them in life. This is known by a word you've heard, but probably not thought of today: justice. Justice. Let that word sink into your consciousness for just a moment. Let me point out that justice supplies an environment where mere laws cannot. Mere laws cannot. We invent laws to divide and separate us, good from bad, right from wrong, acceptable from alien. Where laws divide and punish, justice is supposed to enable us to create an environment in which we protect and provide. We write our laws remembering our anger. We also then forget the justice that may also require some form of mercy. And remember, every form of love requires some measure of justice. It is simply something that we must try to remember, since society has evolved to embrace laws more than justice, even among those closest to us. We also need to understand that environments defined by justice have a polar opposite, and it's called tyranny. Tyranny is also not a thing, but a social environment designed to support oppression, which always denies justice. The requirement for justice in our lives is also part of our birthright, since love, freedom, and peace are impossible without it. And if you're a fan of the Old Testament, that justice is repeatedly decreed by God in covenantal requirements. Justice provides the environment required by the kingdom of God. Yes, it's in the Old Testament, but not the New. When we think about how complicated love is, no matter what form it takes, It should be remembered that it is experienced most often in terms of the vulnerabilities we encounter when we put it into action. And the vulnerabilities are unique, complicated, and always changing, just as each of us. And that makes defining the justice needed in each case sometimes daunting. But I think that there are ways to generalize the problem in order to begin to understand what justice demands. And here is where Timothy Snyder's book came in handy. Snyder's book discusses freedom. He uses observations, personal experiences, and even some philosophy to identify 5 essential requirements for freedom. They are sovereignty, unpredictability, mobility, factuality, and solidarity. Perhaps some of you will recall some of what I said about unpredictability in my last sermon. But I'm an engineer. Show me anything that is essential for the operation of something, and I'll show you how it is also an essential vulnerability. I drive a hybrid, but some gasoline is still essential for me to drive home today. Believe me, it took me $50 to fill up a Prius this week. That makes my need for gasoline a vulnerability for the operation of my car. Everything in Snyder's list works just that way, as essential to freedom and identification of freedom's vulnerabilities. I'd add that those 5 are by no means an exhaustive list, but they represent an excellent starting point that we can use today. You see, because of the interrelated and interdependent nature of love, freedom, and peace, the same basic vulnerabilities apply to all of them. Any differences we find will show up in how we, in each instance, define justice. That is, how we must protect vulnerabilities and provide what those who are vulnerable require in any given situation. Does that sound difficult and complicated? Oh, heavens, yes. But if we can't even get love right by finding the ways justice can protect and nourish it, how can we ever expect to find a path toward freedom? Or even more ambitiously, to peace? We haven't succeeded yet, and we never will unless we start small and work our way up. It really is worth checking out in his book how Snyder describes each of those 5 essentials that are actually also primary vulnerabilities. But for now, let me offer a couple of examples. Let's take, for example, freedom's essential component of sovereignty. Now, sovereignty really means the reality and importance of any individual as more than just one more body. We are bodies, yes. After all, we are normally identified only by our physical bodies. But we are so much more than that. We are sovereign lives occupying these bodies. If we identify someone only by race, ethnicity, skin color, gender, national origin, or other such means, we do nothing more or less than if we identified them by tattooing a number on the inside of their forearms. We remove their sovereignty. We remove their freedom. We also deny them love and at the same time ensure that they cannot know peace. Sovereignty is a vulnerability that requires justice's protection for all we hold dear, especially beginning with love. Or take our old friend, unpredictability. No tyrant on earth has ever allowed those they wish to oppress and subjugate to remain anything but completely predictable, and they use manipulation or fear, or both, to make that so. If tyranny cannot embrace the sovereignty of another person and thus allow love to exist, how likely is it to allow them to also to have the freedom of will and choice to be unpredictable? In many ways, when you think about it, love itself relies on some measure of unpredictability. peace is impossible where love is impossible. The same is true of freedom. Whatever form justice takes, it must prevent our becoming so predictable that love is endangered because it has been manipulated by others to gain power over us. All of this may make great intuitive sense, but it also begs the question, how do we know that this is the way it all works? A very good question, a very good question. My own answer is simply from personal experience. But as soon as I say that, I realize that many of you, and maybe nearly every one of you, know this too, from experience. It all has to do with how we react in the most stressful situations we can remember, especially when some form of evil has gripped our lives. We realize how these three are all one thing when tyranny, injustice, and evil are set to work on our lives in order to break us down, to finish us off by playing on all of our vulnerabilities. In such cases, oppression rules. We are left looking for various means of personal resistance. In those times, we tend to collapse inward, searching for the love we know that is there, that remains within the lives of those around us, and especially of those we hold dearest and perhaps most reverently, even in spite of oppression. Every instinct we possess goes into action to protect the vulnerabilities we know we have with a special kind of justice that only we personally can provide in those moments. When our world can't provide it and we face that kind of stress, justice becomes our conscience and our strength, providing all that is needed to resist tyranny. And history has shown us one more astonishing thing about such situations. As resistance movements have formed and acted throughout history, those who take part in them experience a kind of healing, yes, healing, that justice brings in support of love, freedom, and peace. For this is also part of our birthright. When injustice brings violent harm, justice grows through our resistance to it. And when we act this way, we also know that we are, as much as we can be in those circumstances, and thanks to the justice we build, freer than we have been in a long time. And with those we share love, we find not only freedom, but also peace. My friends, make no mistake about it. This stuff is real. Ask those who have actively resisted tyranny. This is how they do it. Love, freedom, and peace can be found even amidst tyranny. And when they survive, they bring with them the healing justice that empowers resistance just because they survive. In Roman times, the Pax Romana, Roman peace, was based on violent conquest, tyranny, and oppression. Great people. Our world today operates on a very similar model, offering us love through hate, freedom through manipulation and enslavement, and peace through violence and armed conflicts. What I have brought you today demonstrates that we were never meant to accept this. That situation is not part of our birthright. But if we choose to embrace our true birthright in spite of the forces that seek to smother it, we also choose the path of resistance that seeks and demands justice to protect and provide. This will never be an easy path, and it's likely to require the lives of people in many future generations to whom such messages must come and who must face and overcome the challenges of the tyranny that will always seek their destruction. But to even glimpse the future for a moment, we must commit to the work of restoring our birthrights. And I do dearly hope that we can agree that this must begin today.